Lyndon Johnson, some of us remember, I will not seek, nor will I accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president. That is a verbatim quote. And it was because of the anti-war protests. And we need to, when we're out there, we need to send a message to Russia, as Scott did, but in our own way, that we're friends. We don't want to, we actually, I don't know how many of you remember this, but we went through this 40 years ago, where there were exchanges between American audiences and Russian audiences. What's happened? This is a racket. War's a racket. And these people who are running it, as Margaret stated, you know, they're psychopaths. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just about name calling. When somebody doesn't have a feeling, when you lose the capacity for empathy, when you don't know how other people really, you know, how can you see another human being just blown up, children killed? What is this about? Who are we? It's not about who they are, who are we? And we have the ability to stand up here.
There's people that say, you know, I grew up in duck and cover. Duck and cover didn't scare anybody. Duck and cover was a cute little exercise where you went under a table and you hid. And you were a kid, so it was like hide and seek. You know why I'm afraid of nuclear weapons? In 1977, my father moved to Germany. We used to live in Turkey. My father was a career Air Force officer, and we were stationed in Turkey. And in 1977, we moved to Germany. And at first, we lived in a little village called Charlottenbach, beautiful little pastoral village outside of Kaiserslautern. And but it was a little too isolated. My mother worked at a Army facility in Weierhof next to another facility called Northfield. We'll get to that in a second. And it was just too much of a drive for her, so we moved. We moved actually to a wonderful little farmhouse that the German family had been renting to American military since the end of the Second World War. The farmhouse actually had been a temporary headquarters of General Patton's Third Army. This General Patton slept there. It's pretty cool, nice piece of history. We loved it. I grew up there, and I'm a teenager. This is 11th grade and 12th grade. Basically, I spent my senior year in high school in this beautiful little village called Marnheim. Marnheim is located about a half mile from the entry gate to a place called Northfield. Northfield was a nuclear weapons storage facility. It's where the United States stored nuclear weapons. We weren't supposed to talk about it, but everybody knew about it because you can't keep a secret. You know, kids can't keep secrets. You know, and so, you know, mom and dad are talking, and the kid hears something, and the kid goes talk to his friend. Next thing you know, everybody knows there's there's the word, there's nuclear weapons in Northfield. And what happens when you have nuclear weapons in Northfield? Because that's the other thing. You're a senior in high school, your brain's working. It's working pretty good. You're asking your question, well, what does that mean? It means the Russians, the Soviets are going to nuke Northfield. When the war starts, when the balloon goes up, the first Soviet action will be to take out the nuclear weapons storage facility. That is literally a half a mile away from my home. You understand why I'm scared of nuclear weapons? Because in the 1970s and 1980s, we were in a Cold War with the Soviets. We were spending billions of dollars to build a military that was prepared to engage in combat with the Soviets. We were preparing for a war that many people believed was going to happen. This was not theoretical. My father was a career Air Force officer. And at that time, he was a staff officer in the 17th Air Force, but his position was such that when things got really bad, he would go down in the bunker, you know, where the people who needed to live would live. You know who didn't go down in the bunker with good old dad? Me, mom, and my sisters. We went back to Marnheim, which was a half a mile away from Northfield Nuclear Weapons Storage Facility. My dad would only go down in the bunker when there was a real risk of nuclear war. Now, my mom and dad had a little code worked out. Anybody who grew up in the 60s might know this because it references a book of the 1960s called Alas, Babylon. Alas, Babylon is a story of nuclear conflict. And Alas, Babylon is a code word that an Air Force officer used to tell his wife that nuclear weapons are inbound, the world is about to end. And so my parents had this deal that if my dad went into the bunker and the proverbial manure was going to hit the fan, that he would call her and say, "Alas, Babylon." And at that moment, my mom's only job was to gather the children around, look at photo albums, and think nice thoughts about the family. Because we were going to die. And we knew that. We knew it was over. On 2 occasions, my father made that phone call. On 2 occasions, my mother gathered the family around and opened up the photo albums. And we'd talk about the childhood that we had, childhood I had. We'd look at the photos, we'd laugh. And we'd stay up as long as we could, but eventually we'd go to sleep. And in the morning we woke up and we were alive because whatever was supposed to happen didn't happen. But my dad's still in the bunker. Now I was a typical high school kid. I played a lot of sports, loved football. I was on the football team. And what happens when you're football team there, you take the school bus in the morning, you go to school, then you go to practice, and in the evening you get a bus back to your house. I live about 45 miles away from the school. It's a long bus ride. But you're playing football, but in your mind, your dad's in the bunker. And last night, your mom got a phone call where your dad said, "Alas, Babylon." Now, there's a highway, they call them Autobahns in Germany, and on the highway, trucks drive by. You guys are familiar with the phenomenon, aren't you? When light hits a mirror, what happens? It flashes, right? So you're driving, and every once in a while, there's a flash. Now I'm playing football. I'm supposed to be focused on executing, I, right, left, Z, square 3. And I'm running out there, and I'm getting ready to go down in my position, and there's a flash. And the only thing I can think is I'm dead. I just died. It's it. That's the flash. You know why I'm scared of nuclear weapons? Because I grew up thinking I was going to die. Every day of my life, living next to a nuclear weapons storage facility. Now, how the hell do we translate that experience into the experience of Americans today? And I don't have the answer, but you know who did and gave it to me tonight? Dennis Kucinich and Theodore Postal. You see, the presentation that Theodore Postal gave today, where he used Washington, D.C. as an example of a nuclear explosion, resonated with people who live in Washington, D.C. Because suddenly they sat there and went, "That's my home. That's the kindergarten my children go to. That's the bakery we go to buy our bread. And it's vaporized. It's done. It's finished. It's gone. If there's a nuclear weapon, everything I love and cherish is finished." I can't commit to this because we don't know if we're going to be able to do this or not, but we're going to do it. Theodore Postal is going to take that slide that he did, and we're going to pick critical areas around the country. And Theodore Postal is going to make that slide of that community. And we're going to go to that community, and we're going to scare the crap out of them by saying if there's a nuclear war, this is what's going to happen to you. It's not theory, it's reality. You're going to die in the worst possible way. I have a mission, and that mission is to put the fear in the belly that I felt as a high school senior in the belly of everybody who lives in the United States of America, so that they are convinced that if there's a nuclear war, they will die a horrible death. That is the only way we're going to wake America up, because otherwise, it's just a cartoon. It's just a joke. It's just a game.
Thank you.
Next question.
I'm Jerry Condon with Veterans for Peace. Just have a question. It's been said that we're closer to a nuclear war now than any time since 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, or maybe more so. But people don't have that sense of urgency. The U.S., most of the American people have no idea we're that close to war. So how do we inject this sense of urgency and realism? If we're going to really mobilize people the way that Scott and everybody, how do we get people to feel as urgent as Scott and the rest of us here in this room, to make them, to really clarify that we are at a very, very critical moment. And I think that's part of a challenge. So I'm just asking Scott and you to answer that question.
Let me take a quick stab at that and then pass this over to Scott. How do we become concerned about anything? Anything, ever? I mean, think about this thing. It's because we hear it over and over and over and over. We hear it from so many different directions. It's human nature. We get concerned when we start to hear war, disease, whatever. This is why this meeting's important, and over and over and over. We really have to, the holidays, people are coming together now. It's a time when we're all meeting, and we need to take advantage of that. Not to pour water on a season of festival, but to understand that the beauty of that season is to be preserved as part of what we give to the future generations. That the light of the season should not be the flash of a nuclear detonation. And so, the question is important because it's about how do we wake up people? And I'm telling you, just over and over and over, we just have to keep repeating the message. And it's like ripples in a pond. You cast a stone into a pond, you watch the ripples. We've all had that experience from childhood on. And then another one, and pretty soon, I want a quote comes to mind, and I'll give this back to you, Scott. In 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was on a tour of Africa, and he went to Cape Town. And this was at the height of apartheid. And he went to speak to these students, and he was talking about freedom, the potential of freedom. And of course, these students, apropos of Scott's, awareness of the complications that come up with color, these students looked at him and, said, as just a white guy, what does he know about what we're going through? He gave this answer, and I want to share it with you because it does bear on this moment. From somebody who, when he was assassinated, I really believe something was taken away from America that was really vital at that time, and still is. He said, in answer to the question from one of the students at Cape Town, about how would he know what could be done, what he hasn't been through it. He said, each time a man or a woman stands up for an ideal, acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he or she sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples can create a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. We are as ripples of hope. We are called upon to sweep down the mighty wall of oppression, of fear of a nuclear exchange, and to create an opportunity for real brotherhood, the kind that King stood for and died for. So this is our moment to do that. And it's funny how we leap back in terms of time and space here. But what Kennedy said then is ever more true today, and it's a call. It's our call across the decades for real action on behalf of humanity.
A short and small local nuclear war. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. And that's, Putin is very careful introducing and showing all his arsenal of weapons. Recently he just did this new weapon, is Oreshnik, you probably heard about that. And just to show the world what can be done even without nuclear. He's just showing that he has it, but he's very responsible guy. He knows what's going to happen. If it will start, there is not gonna survive anyone. So we're just waiting for Americans to wake up. We're just waiting for them.
And first of all, spasiba, and thank you for raising this point. And we have an obligation. That's why we're in this room.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Our job is to wake up America, and that's why Scott brought us all together here, so that we would wake up the country from its slumber while these nuclear weapons are beginning to be emplaced. And so thank you for raising that. And here again, it's the lack of understanding, Americans' lack of understanding of Russians. And Russians' lack of understanding of Americans. We are Americans, most of the people in this room are Americans who are committed to making sure that we get the word out to stop a war. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Yes, that's the gentleman who's been waiting.
Sorry, I just wanted to thank Scott for allowing us to be here. On behalf of the Russian community, of course, we all are understanding what Americans thinking as a people. However, this past administration is a psychopath. They are definitely trying to bombard us with this war that nobody needs. Nobody wants war. So, thank you so much.
I'm really excited about a Trump administration because I think there's more opportunities for us to build a real peace movement. You know why? Democrats will suddenly discover that they want to end wars because it's a Republican in the White House. And because there's so much division among the Republicans, too, that we can use to our advantage. So we've got to think of it as a huge challenge that we have in front of us. Take this fear that we have of a nuclear war and turn it into real action with strategic kinds of ways of organizing. And I especially want to address you as a young person, because I am amazed at all the organizing that has been going on the campuses. It has been beautiful. And I know it is subdued now because of repression, but it's not ended. I was yesterday at the University of Pennsylvania meeting with students, and they're telling me all the ways they're finding to get in and out of these new restrictions. And it is wonderful, and we've got to be there to support the students. And what we have in front of us is an amazing movement in this country to support Palestinians. It is big. It is a big movement. It's not just these little pockets that you mentioned. And how do I know? Because when we had Bernie Sanders' resolutions of disapproval for certain weapons to be stopped from going to Israel, there was a full court press coming out on all of the senators not to vote for it. They had calls from President Biden. They had Anthony Blinken coming to the Senate directly to say to them, don't vote with Bernie Sanders. They had Chuck Schumer, who was whipping like they said he's never whipped before, to tell the Democrats, don't vote with Sanders. And they had AIPAC doing that as well. And despite all of that, their phones were ringing off the hook from constituents. And in every single state, there was a broad-based movement that was pushing them. And the result was that 19 senators voted to stop these weapons to Israel. The first time ever in history there has even been a vote. And that represents 40% of the senators in the Democratic Party. 40%, that's a lot. So that's something that we can build on and get many more of them when it's a Republican in the White House. Then we have to get the Republicans. And I think there's a lot of possibilities for us to be hooking up with people who consider themselves Republicans, non-interventionists, libertarians, whatever they want to call themselves, and be pushing to say, we don't want any more of our tax dollars going to fuel these overseas wars. And that's something that resonates with a lot of people around this country. So we do have tremendous opportunity. We have to be excited about that. And for anybody who lives in the DC area or can come to DC, I really encourage you to come with us in Congress. The United States, as bad as our country is, I don't know of any other country in the world where you can actually walk into their Congress, where you can actually walk into their offices. We can do that here. You don't even have to be a US citizen to walk into Congress and walk into an office. And people say, how do they keep letting you in? Because until now, it is a public place. It is our house. Right, Dennis? It's the public's house. We pay the bills. And we have to feel like we are the owners of that Congress. We can't walk into the White House. We can't even get near the fence anymore, but we can walk into Congress. And that's what many of us have been doing every single day, Monday to Friday, starting at 10 in the morning, and we go from office to office to office. And so if anybody wants to join, I have 10 new people from over there at the press club. We put you on a WhatsApp list, and we can give you information every day on where we're going to meet. So please join us. And of course, wherever you live, you have, except in DC, you have 2 senators. And in the whole country, you have members of Congress. And whether they're Democrat or Republican, I think they are movable on these issues now. So let's move them. Thank you.